today's topic is Europe-Africa relations, and then more specifically, economy and employment. And I'm extremely keen to be part of this discussion because I think we are at a critical time. I mean, as the title of the two-day event says, an EU-Africa alliance in times of disruption. That's the framework in which indeed we place the topic of today. And let me start maybe with the disruption, because it's clear that the disruptions we've all known and that affect basically all parts of the globe hit Africa, I think, particularly hard. That's true, first of all, for the pandemic, which has pushed the African continent into its first economic recession in the past 25 years, but to which was added now Russia's military aggression against Ukraine that exacerbates really all these existing challenges. There's the disruption of the supply chains, inflation, high commodity prices, and so on. And as Secretary General of the UN, Guterres, said, it's really a triple food, energy, and financial crisis that is hitting our partner continent. We see it when it comes to food, the worst food crisis in African history, with wheat prices, raising, almost by 40% in 2022, to which, of course, the impact of climate change needs to be added. We see an energy crisis with prices going up there as well, with a very difficult starting point for the African continent, since it has the lowest electrification rate in the world, with only 46% in 2019, according to the latest figures of IRENA, with energy needs that will double by 2040. And this is then compounded by, of course, a financing crisis, where we see how already before Russia's war against Ukraine, how the fiscal space that our African partners had was incredibly limited, hence the initiative that was taken by Europe to push an agenda of SDR on lending. But obviously now that all major central banks over the world are raising their interest rates to contain the surge in inflation, this will increase the existing debt burden and stress of African countries in these times when their fiscal space is already limited. So if you look at it from that point of view, it's a bleak and challenging picture for Africa's economy indeed. But what we've done here in Brussels and with our member states, also as we were preparing the summit with Africa in February, is to really avoid to just keep the eyes on the steering wheel. We need to keep our eyes on the road, and we need to look at the underlying fundamentals beyond today's challenges. And if you look at that, you see that the challenges for sure are big, but the opportunities are at least as big. And I just want to highlight four of them. First of all, there's demographics. There is a young, fast-growing population. 60% of Africans are under 25 years old, which means that the working age population will grow by 450 million people by 2035. Now, we know that this is a two-edged sword, but if we look at it from the positive side, it clearly means that there is a dynamic, entrepreneurial, potentially very strong labor force available in Africa. And if we can unleash the dynamic, the creativity of those people, it will be a major propelling factor for Africa's economic growth. The second big element we need to focus on is Africa's abundant natural resources. I mean, the figures are really staggering. If you see 25% of global biodiversity, 30% of mineral resources, 85% of the global platinum, 75% of diamond, 60% of cobalt, 40% of gold, it's all in Africa. 60% of the world's unexploited arable land is in Africa. 8% of the world's natural gas and 12% of the oil reserves. So if you look at the abundance of natural resources, and if you look at how the future economy, if we look at the twin transition, green and digital, will need those natural resources, you can see that unlocking that, look at it right now, gives that kind of much more positive perspective on Africa's economy, which brings me to the third positive element, which is renewable energy. I mean, the continent is incredibly well endowed when it comes to renewable energy. Africa is home to 60% of the best solar resources worldwide, whereas only 1% of its photovoltaic capacity is currently used. So the potential to unlock, whether it's photovoltaic, whether it's geothermal, whether it's wind power, the potential is huge. Africa can likewise become a major player in green and renewable hydrogen. We are already working with a number of African countries. We are proceeding relatively fast. If we there bring the new green hydrogen technology to the potential that the continent has, I mean, the contribution that this will make to Africa's economic dynamism in the future will be tremendous. And of course, there is gas. I know it is a sensitive issue, but it's one we need to keep discussing because we clearly see natural gas as an important transition source. And brings me to the fourth critical point that is very positive, which is the regional integration, which can be a really powerful dynamic for Africa's growth. I mean, we know that from our European experience, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the dynamics, and for sure there's still a lot of work ahead, but the ambition is there, the political will is there, hard work is being done to implement it, and the power that this can unleash for the continent is as well incredible. So if we look at these four basic drivers, economic integration, renewable energy, which is the energy of the future, natural resources, and human resources, we see that beyond today's current challenges, if we look at the economy of the future, for Africa, the sun absolutely shines in order to boost its own economic growth and to become an engine, a contributor of growth in the world. Now, what does it mean for the EU-Africa partnership? We've been looking at this as we were preparing the summit in February in two ways. First of all, strategic autonomy. I mean, we see how, in light of the disruptions that we see across the globe, now man-made with Russia's war, before that with COVID, that across the globe, regional entities are strengthening their resilience to deal with these kind of disruptions. It's what in Europe we call open strategic autonomy. And I think that that's what Africa is working on as well. And we said to ourselves, if we can as European Union position ourselves as a partner of reference for Africa to build that kind of strategic autonomy, to build that kind of self-reliance and resilience in an open, globalized world, if we can help them build that through partnership, co-creation, co-investment, then we will be on the right track. And the summit in February has laid the basis for that, has put that at the highest political level on the map, and has identified a number of areas on which we will focus. And all of them are linked to the economy, and they're captured in a global gateway, Africa-Europe investment package that looks very specifically at unleashing a number of these potentials. First of all, the package, which is worth around 150 billion euros for the next 5 years, will mobilize more investment, more public investment and more private investment by basically using official development aid, ODA, through the guarantees we have to de-risk those public and private investments. Secondly, this partnership will provide a major booster for Africa's regional economic integration. I've referred to it already. If you look at, the exports outside the continent, it's mainly raw materials. But if you look at what Africa exports and imports within the continent, there are processed and semi-processed goods that represent the majority of their exports directed to other African markets. So there's a huge potential, a huge market, basically, to build stronger regional value chains. And if we link that up with Africa's continental regional integration, we really get a good thing going. And we are working with African partners, with the African Union Commission, with the African Continental Free Trade Secretariat, with key partners like the International Trade Center, the ITC, in Geneva, to identify specific value chains where that kind of regional integration has the biggest potential. And we are moving with a full-scale mobilization on this as Team Europe, meaning the European Commission and the member states. We're looking at it from a soft angle and from a hard angle. So we are looking at hard infrastructure as well, such as strategic economic road corridors, railway, digital backbones, and so on. The third building block, apart from mobilizing investment and economic integration, looks at the local private sector. There's a lot of scope there to unleash that kind of African entrepreneurial potential and spirit by boosting the local private sector. We will be supporting business-friendly reforms of local and national and regional frameworks. We will be supporting the public-private sector dialogue, both within Africa itself and between Africa and Europe. And I think the business forum we have, and which is now more specifically looking at sectoral meetings, like, for instance, the matchmaking events we're doing on the pharma industry, are good examples. And then we have, I think, a critical initiative, which is a big Team Europe initiative to support basically access to finance for African small, medium-sized, and even micro-enterprises. It's something that came out of discussions we've had with plenty of players in the run-up to the summit, which is that very often African companies, they take an initiative, and then when you have a startup, you go through what they call the valley of death, the point when you're loss-making and when you find it very hard to get to finance. And since most of the finance in Africa is coming from banks, that's when companies most often don't make it. And so we need to boost equity investment, impact investment, angel investors. And we're now creating a big initiative on investing in young businesses in Africa, whereby we use our money to de-risk those kinds of investments so that young entrepreneurs can really, when they have good ideas and they pass through these initial stages, then continue to grow. And in all of that, we will have a specific attention, of course, for women economic empowerment, because we clearly see that there is a huge potential there to unlock. And we have plenty of examples, such as the one we are doing with GIZ, our German colleagues, and with the Tony Elumelu Foundation, where we have been supporting more than 2,500 African women entrepreneurs already through increased access to finance and access to venture capital investments. And we will be topping up that work with Tony Elumulu's foundation. Fourth element, decent work. I mean, it's very good to create jobs, but subsequently we need to make sure that all those young people are fit for those jobs and for the labor market. And here as well, we are continuing to work with African partners to design programs that basically bring some of the experience we have in Europe with technical and vocational education and training to the ground in Africa. A critical element here is a matchmaking in what the private sector, including the local, including the MSME, as their needs over the next 5 to 10 years, and how we training programs that actually play into that current and future. Here as well, I mean, when we discussed it with African leaders at the summit, there's a huge demand there on the African side. We have some very valuable expertise, I think, in Europe in doing this, and we are matching African partners and European partners to really make that happen. Here as well, we will have a number of really big Team Europe initiatives to support this kind of TVET initiatives that are around. And my final point is about social protection. We know that to make all of that work, economic development and the creation of jobs, the training of young people to take up those jobs, that the critical third component, important for Europe and important as well for African partners, is indeed the kind of investment in social protection, which currently is not enough available in Africa. The request to work with us on this, including with the ILO and so on, is clearly there. And so we are working under the Global Gateway Investment Package at a real opportunity to promote decent employment, to link it to the informal sectors, and to build it up into a really serious package of support of social protection systems at a national level. And here again, we are topping that up with the regional Team Europe initiative on social protection. I know this is a very sketchy overview. It may have been a bit long, but it's still very, let's say, superficial. It can be much more granular, but we don't have the time for that. But I wanted to give you that overview because it somehow translates the kind of vision we have for Europe-Africa relations as it was discussed by leaders jointly in the February summit. And it starts, and I hope that is understood, and it's really one of my key messages, it starts from a point of view that is incredibly upbeat and positive about Africa. We cannot be blind or underestimate the huge challenges our partners are going through right now. But it would also be a mistake not to look through that, not to look beyond that, and not to see the huge potential that is there, the incredible power of African leaders' political will to make that happen, and the very strong agenda that they have designed in their Agenda 2063 and that they are consistently rolling out. I think it's Europe's ambition, as set in February in the summit, to be a key partner for Africa on building that strong African agenda. That's what will make our partnership a partnership that is sustainable, that is valuable for the future, and that is a sign of the times. I will stop there. Thank you very much.